Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen. Now
We
tap
would
that
be
screen.
honored if you would
Exit
join
back and says, hey everyone, from a maths lesson.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcoming guys.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points
Now
and
tap
prepare
that
to play.
screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine.
Grumps says that eggs and bacon hide.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Grumps says welcome
Gang
one and all.
gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that
Exam
screen, yeah,
Bacon
tap it,
says
tap
that
it.
Grumps, my
Gang
tutor,
gremlins
said
on
if
the
you don't want to learn
scene.
shush, so I go on my phone log.
Tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Gaga
Gang
Grumps says
gremlins
roll
on the
eggs.
scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Grumps says that eggs and bacon is certainly an option.
Now tap that screen.
Benjamin is in
Eggs
the
and bacon
house.
says can't miss a Gaga live.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says eggs despite being in a maths lesson.
Eggs and bacon says it grumps exactly.
Gaga Grumps says wish I knew why I have to resize the Wordle source every time lol. Gaga Grumps says okay, who wants to play Wordle? Eggs and bacon says that Gaga and Grumps me.
Thanks for the
Gaga
follow.
Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Eggs and Bacon says, I have no sound BTW.
Grumps says at CFC hardly not gonna happen.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. F. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Exam Bacon says, what did the wheel land on?
Eggs and Bacon says, I got it.
La da 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 da
Grump says at CFC Harley Bridge is 6 letters.
Handy says freeze. Gaga Grump says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grump says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Thanks for the follow.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thanks for the follow.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grump says your word starting with F, please, Noya Bear.
Jimmy says Jimmy.
Grump says at Jimmy, welcome back.
Eggs and Bacon says Gaga have
Benjamin is in the
on
house.
the nose.
Gaga Grump says D in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grump says Jimmy in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Jimmy says at Grumps thanks.
We would be honored if you would join
Gaga
us.
Grump says no, I didn't eggs. Gaga Grump says eggs. Gaga Grump says frame, you got Noya.
Nope.
Gaga Grump says yellow AM and E in need of homes. Jimmy says for anyone who's new. Eggs and Bacon says makes.
Meadow Dart says name.
Mild says I level up.
Maddo Dart says name.
Jimmy says meaty.
Maddo Dart says name.
Maddo Dart says name.
Maddo Dart says name.
Maddo Dart says name.
Gaga Grump says mild in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart and level up coming at end of game. Maddo Dart says name.
Jimmy says guys and girls that can't be
Nope.
second.
Grump says name is 4 letters.
Eggs and Bacon says I not go there.
Gaga Grump says meaty fits. No plurals in Wordle and name is only 4 letters. Gaga Grump says yep, meaty doesn't fit.
My alt says names.
Maddo Dart says names.
Maddo Dart says names.
Maddo Dart says names.
Meadow Dart says names.
Gaga Grump says no plurals, how about named?
Maddo Darts says names. Maddo Darts says names.
Maddo Darts says names.
LL Creative 1 says camel.
Maddo Dart says names.
Maddo Dart says names.
Maddo Dart says names.
Maddo Darts says names.
Grumps says that Laurie Hunter higher.
Gaga Grumps says he's not listening
Benjamin
to
is
me.
in the
No
house.
plurals. Gaga Grumps says no change. Jimmy says media.
L Creative 1 says media.
Eggs and bacon says metal.
Gaga Grumps says media works.
Good game.
Jemmy says wait.
Jimmy says I was gonna say wait, there isn't AD.
Level up.
Steph says hi.
Gaga Grumps says too late lol.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says Omega is a good shout.
Steph says enema.
Level
Exam
up.
Bacon says Omega is a shout.
Steph says, oh no, Anne.
Gaga Grumps says gimme a sec to kick Tickfinity.
L Creative 1 says the lag.
Steph says the TTS is really behind.
It's a L.
Gaga Grumps says yep, hopefully should be better now, hopefully.
Guessed it right. Now here we are, another
Miles says, can you do the level up song because I level
We
up?
would be honored if you would join us.
green, green. Look at that glow. Didn't
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this. Level up in the room pool.
New Phantom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you help me thrive. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Summer says LOLO.
Grumps says it's summer, welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up in the room, my alt.
My alt says that Grumps hi Grumps.
Summer says it Grumps HELLOO.
Mild says at Gaga and Grumps, that's okay.
Gaga Grumps says creative in the house. Gaga Grumps says Steph in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Summer in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says at Mile Voy.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Well, Creative 1 says he a Gaga and Grumps.
Crystal says good morning. I am in for a quick minute.
Gaga Grumps says let's play
We
Wordle.
would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says Crystal in the house for a quick minute, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says at Crystal good morning.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at Ill Creative 1 Heya.
Crystal says at Grumps good morning.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. N.
Eggs and Bacon says on the nose again.
Grumps says at Eggs and Bacon.
Gaga Grumps says eggs on the nose.
Summer says at ASSBURGERS pardon.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts be flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper!
Grumps says quaint how the letter N brings out the twat in some people.
Thanks for the follow.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says Kendra won the race, but Crystal storms in and stole the crown.
Grumps says it does that is dedication.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with N please Crystal.
Crystal says noise.
Eggs and Bacon says Nexus.
Gaga Grumps says one big tap that was Des lol. Gaga Grumps says noise you got. Gaga Grumps says yellow S in need of a home.
Grumps says at Speedasonic near no N.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says spark fits.
Kendra Melissa 33 says snake.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless A. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Kendra and the awesomes. Gaga Grumps says count doesn't have an A or an S lol.
Grumps says it's Satori plays where do you see an S or A in count?
Thanks for the follow.
Well, Creative One says amuse.
Gaga Grumps says can't be glass S doesn't live there.
Bull Zero Sam says a wash. Kendra Melissa 33 says slash.
Gaga Grumps says can TB amuse.
Grumps says at arlo.board.hufc no plural in Wordle.
Gaga Grumps says tasty works.
Crystal says assy.
Gaga Grumps says S moved into number 3 and Y into 5. Are still homeless.
Grumps says at Bromsey Rovers Football Club no T.
Or Creative One says sadly.
Gaga Grumps says I like assay. Tests the A for both spots.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says and is the word GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Or Creative One says oh yo dot dotter.
Gaga Grumps says Cooper in the house. Time for some wiggle butt.
Shout! It's Cooper! Hey,
Grumps says Cooper time.
It's Cooper! Wiggle butt, just a little. Thanks for the follow. With the wiggle butt, gremlins say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper, watch him go. Wiggle butt, just a little mutt. With the wiggle butt, gremlins say what? With the wiggle butt, just a little mutt. With the wiggle butt, gremlins say what? With the wiggle butt. That cute and fluffy puffball tail Cooper.
Saren not Saren says hello glorious cocker.
Just a little mutt with a wiggle butt. Gremlins say what? With a wiggle butt.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says all hail the corgi.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says Saren in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says I've had me a wiggle, now it's time to Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Saren not Saren says do a wiggly Wordle.
Gaga Grumps says ha. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C.
Grumps says it Crystal.
Gaga Grumps says Crystal on the nose. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
A creative one says that Gaga and Grumps.
Grumps says that Jensen underscore runs underscore until it most definitely is not.
Crystal says Cooper brought me that sea law.
Gaga Grumps says he did. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says that Crystal so you bribed the wheel, is what you were saying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says there was a battle going on then.
Saren Not Saren says too close.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please Noya. Gaga Grumps says cable you got.
Crystal says at Grumps, yes sir, I told Cooper the wheel did not play right lol.
Gaga Grumps says a green L moved into number 4 Wordle Street.
Grumps says at Crystal you'll fuel the conspiracy theorists.
Kendra Melissa 33 says lucky.
Gaga Grumps says no C for lucky.
Kendra Melissa 33 says, oh yeah, my bad.
Crystal says it Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says not sure if Midley is valid, but let's give it a spin.
Saren Not Saren says doily.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle says nope. Gaga Grumps says doily fits. Gaga Grumps says I moved in next door to L. Gaga Grumps says can't be godly.
Saren Not Saren says stilt.
LL Creative One says lingo.
Crystal says guild.
Gaga grumps says spill works.
Creative One says guild.
Crystal says Gil.
Kendra Melissa 33 says drill.
Gaga grumps says we end in ill. Check for trap. Options in the chat.
The creative one says grill.
Kendra Melissa 33 says no, sorry.
Kendra Melissa 33 says harder than looks.
Gaga grumps says okay, a word with as many of those as possible with the U as the vowel.
Crystal says I have to go now. Have a great day. I woke up late.
Kendra Melissa 33 says grill.
Gaga grumps says have a good day Crystal, thanks for the wiggles.
Grumps says at Crystal have a great day. Hello Creative One says Graft.
Gaga grumps says I'm going grift.
Crystal says Fugit.
Gaga grumps says frill it is.
Jimmy says frill.
Well, creative one says frill.
Good game.
Kendra Melissa 33 says frill.
Crystal says frill it is.
Crystal says that Gaga and grumps you too.
It's
Good game.
Gaga is in the box. Don't let her
Gaga grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let him push yours. Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly. Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game, Gremlins, let's go. Game,
Gaga grumps says do the do for Gaga. Share the live chat for chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game, Gremlins, let's go. Game, Gremlins, let's go. Game, Gremlins, let's go.
Gaga grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Gremlins, let's go. Game, Gremlins, let's go.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says it's simple really, we are not playing today's Wordle. If you try to spoil it, you're out of here.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. F. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Hearts be flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says tapping not spamming will. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says we're who creative got one for the day lol. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with F please creative.
Well, creative one says finally.
Gaga Grumps says finally is too many letters lol.
Well, creative one says flash.
Gaga Grumps says hi Aria, how goes it? Gaga Grumps says flash you got.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow A in need of a home. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Noya.
Noibius says mango.
LL Creative One says emerald.
Gaga Grumps says mango fits. Gaga Grumps says we have 3 greens move into Wordle Street.
Well, Creative One says Banco.
Gaga Grumps says do we have banjo for fireworks?
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance Explode 'em on her
Gaga
face.
Grumps
She's
says
in a
Wordle in
happy
3.
place.
Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Well, Creative One says how is it a rerun when you can see what you're typing in the chat? Doesn't make sense.
Gaga Grumps says it's the new trolling lol.
Grumps says it rain troll off.
Gaga Grumps says anyone watching properly can see lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says it ill Creative One more importantly. If they can do a pre-recorded show that interacts, let me know.
Moyabeer says BRM.
Grumps says it Noah Rowan higher.
Well, Creative One says at Grumps.
Well, Creative One says G for Grumps lol.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. G for Gaga and Grumps. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says it ill Creative One has R for the G. Grump says at best Ohio.
Tapping don't stop like a thun. Who will be crowned like a thun? Gremlin renowned like a thun. Fingers on fire like a thun. Gremlins don't tire like a thun. Hearts beat flying like a thun. Gremlins
Gaga Grump says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grump says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grump says wahoo twice, it's never been seen before. Gaga Grump says your word starting with G, please creative.
Soparl says is it banjo?
Gaga Grump says the last one was banjo.
Creative 1 says Grump.
Gaga Grump says Grump you got.
Sapar L says for QQQ.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grump says a green you moved into 3 Wordle Street.
Noya Beer says couch.
Well, Creative 1 says couch.
Gaga Grump says couch fits. Gaga Grump says no change 7 letters wiped from the game.
Creative 1 says fruit.
Noya Beer says blunt.
Gaga Grump says coach has no you.
Well, Creative 1 says flute.
Gaga Grump says taunt works. Gaga Grump says we end in aren't.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Cody Spence says don't.
Noebier says Dutch to see what it starts with.
Precious says hi all.
Gaga Grumps says no H for haunt must be daunt.
Pink Speedo BDR says that. Supposed to say hi.
Cody Spence says dawn.
Good game.
Grump says it precious _hair.
Precious says Von Don.
Benjamin is in the house.
A random star chosen by fate. Play a part. It's a live day.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Cody Spence says yay.
Grump says it FLEUR higher.
Gaga Grumps says precious in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
A pretty sky.
Cody Spence says yay.
A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga. Da-da-da. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Creative One says that. Ryan, you missed the pre-recorded trolls we had earlier.
Gaga Grumps says yes, Elliot. First word is won by like race, but the rest is free for all. Gaga Grumps says lol creative. Gaga Grumps says Ryan in the house. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Pink Speedo BDO says at LL Creative One, sorry been playing with my chicken, gathering eggs and throwing gnaw for my dog.
Noebier says be all
Cody Spence says going.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. G for Grumps again. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Cody Spence says going.
Cody Spence says go.
Grump says playing with my chicken is one of the weirder innuendos one has ever seen. Grump says it's CONNOR no, never.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says next one saying audio gets muted.
Thanks for the follow.
Grumps says you were warned.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with G please coder. Gaga Grumps says Ryan on a ban. Faints. Gaga Grumps says great you got.
Grumps says at PINKSPEDOBDR back to like jail after your day out yesterday.
Pink
Speedo BDR says at Grumps Law. I have 100 plus chickens and some of them are like a dog.
No letters to shout. Wipe out. Wipe out. Lost in the grid, can't figure it out.
Grumps says at Kino High.
Oh no. Wipe out.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Noyabeer says bunny.
Cody Spence says apple.
Grumps says at PINKSPEDOBDR size wise or noise wise.
Gaga Grumps says chops is plural and won't be used though lol.
The creative one says slide.
Elliot says point.
Gaga Grumps says spamming will not be recorded. Gaga Grumps says no E for slide.
Elliot says, oh, sorry.
Gaga Grumps says still fits. Gaga Grumps says yellow P and L in need of homes.
Grumps says at Kosh 16 you all right there?
Gaga Grumps says pluck works. Are we going to pluck Ryan's chicken?
Grump says it Truman needs an L.
Gaga Grumps says homeless you added to the street.
Grump says old egg hens make lovely chicken soup.
Gaga Grumps says no S for lupus. Gaga Grumps says lumpy is a shout.
Precious says stop spamming G's.
Pink Speedo BDR says I'm blind.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says stop spamming Felix.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto.
Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heartbeat. Share us round.
Good
Now
game.
tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. It's your warm-up.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto.
Gremlins on
Take
the
a seat,
scene.
grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says heart me equals
Game
text to speech.
Gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Game Gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Game Gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga
Game
Grumps
Gremlins
says if you
on the
haven't done
scene.
it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Creative One says at Pink Speedaber.
Thanks for
Gaga
the follow.
Grumps says thanks for coming, Coda. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says we're on every day at 4 PM UK. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. K.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top. Like a thon, tap and don't stop. Like a thon, who will be crowned? Like a thon, gremlin renowned. Like a thon, fingers on fire. Like a thon, gremlins don't tire. Like a thon, hearts
Gaga
beat
Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says the pink speedos are back on top. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with K, please, Ryan.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
A creative one says kayak.
Gaga Grumps says yes, the leaderboard is notoriously flaky, Felix. But it's all we have. Gaga Grumps says ha to the tune of ITSTY bitsy teeny weeny, I take it. Gaga Grumps says kinky you got. Gaga Grumps says green, I moved into number 2 Wordle Street.
Will Creative One says vivid.
DVP says site.
Thanks for the follow.
PH7 says that.
Gaga Grumps says bold choice of 2 double letters. Gaga Grumps says and it paid off with green I and D.
Precious says Lipid.
PH7 says rigid.
Gaga Grumps says lipid for fireworks.
Grumps says or not.
Gaga Grumps says nope. Gaga Grumps says okay timid. Rigid. Any other options?
Precious says that's it, just the two.
Gaga Grumps says we have enough guesses for both THHEN. Gaga Grumps says rigid was suggested first, I believe.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat all green grid.
Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours!
Grumps says at football they need to tap fast or
Let
snipe
those
the crowd.
stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team Gaga,
Thanks for the follow.
Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team
Gaga Grumps says do the Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs.
Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, 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 Gaga,
Grumps says at PINKSPEDOBDR local post today.
Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
LL Creative One said so. Grumps says at football 8 laters.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Grumps says at Ill Creative One what is?
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at PINKSPEDOBDR the mute hammer is quite effective.
Oh, Creative One says at Grumps the pre-recorded trolls, of course.
Gaga Grumps says TTS will be live as long as your fan club membership is active. I believe it wears off after 3 days or so.
Grump says it ill creative one.
Gaga Grump says we are starting with A. K again.
Grump says at Anshika we do try to make them see the error do their ways rather instantaneously.
Gaga Grump says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn?
Gaga Grump says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thorn. Hearts beat flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grump says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grump says your word starting with K please Ryan.
A creative one says at Grumps they are supposed to come out with a new Gremlins movie this year.
Gaga Grump says I will when I have a word lol. Gaga Grump says kinda you got. Gaga Grump says Yellow K in need of a home. Gaga Grump says no A for black. Gaga Grump says spook for gremlins.
Grump says it ill creative one I do not approve. They are unlikely to capture the silly charm of the old ones.
Precious says shock.
Gaga Grump says SO and K all moved into Wordle Street. Gaga Grump says will we be shocked and all by fireworks? Gaga Grump says we will not. Precious says stalk.
Pink Speedo BDR says dang it.
Gaga Grump says can't be stock.
Creative One says Stork.
Pink Speedo BDR says dropped in by Stork.
Gaga Grump says Stork is in the grid. Gaga Grump says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Pink Speedo BDR says get that Stork out of here, we need no more kids law.
Chosen by fate, play a part, it's a live date. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grump says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining.
Precious says a pinned video on page will explain.
Gaga Grump says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Only in three, a pretty sky. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grump says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next word. Gaga Grump says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grump says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grump says it's CF a day late. Try to spoil today's Wordle again and you are gone.
Gaga Grump says we are starting with A. E. Gaga Grump says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grump says it Trina, welcome back.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin
Grump says Ebola.
like a thorn. Fingers on fire like a thorn. Gremlins don't tire.
Tina says it Grumps, thank you, how are you?
Hearts beat flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grump says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grump says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grump says a Trina swinging the mute hammer in a manner that makes Thor blush. Yourselves.
Gaga Grump says your word starting with E, please, Ryan.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grump says Trian in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Thanks for the follow.
Grump says Ebola.
Thanks for the follow.
Pink Speedo BDR says evict the spammers with the hammer.
Gaga Grumps says lol evict you got.
Grump says at PINKSPEEDOBDR.
Trina says at Grumps is one night author. In good, thank you.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Grump says it at Canal.
Lost in the grid, can figure it out.
Gaga Grumps says hi Victor Ryan one starting word.
Oh no.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Pink Speedo BDR says wiped out in the pink Speedo running from Grump's handbags and hammer lol.
Grump says at Trina nobody could script the glorious and humble being that is me.
A creative one says drunk.
DVP says drama.
Pink Speedo BDR says it ill creative one though I'm sober.
Gaga Grumps says yeah Jensen the like counter is awful at counting. Gaga Grumps says drunk FITD.
A creative one says at Pink Speedober.
Pink Speedo BDR says at Jensen, yeah, I should have way more taps than it shows.
Precious says frown.
Gaga Grumps says R lives at number 2 and then needs a home. Gaga Grumps says frown works.
Pink Speedo BDR says no crown.
Precious says groan.
Gaga Grumps says N found a home in 5 and O moved into 3.
A creative one says groan.
Pink Speedo BDR says groan grumps.
Trina says a grumps that's not what Gaga told me. I heard your comments me joking. Very posh, sir.
Grump says at PINKSPEEDOBDR stop listening in on me.
Thanks for the follow.
Precious says this chat is wild today.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Welcoming guys.
Pink Speedo BDR says it grumps.
Grab your heartbeat. Share us round. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it.
Gaga Grumps says you got me chuckling precious.
Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Grumps says that Trina and that's why she is barred from speaking.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game of Wordle. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Hey, Speedo BDR says that Precious underscore that's what happens when the Speedos and monsters come out wall.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says Q. I demand my Q.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C for Q. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thon, race to the top. Like a thon, tap and don't stop. Like a thon, who will be crowned? Like a thon, gremlin renowned. Like a thon, fingers on.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
The creative one says, Ryan already 60 at the start.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Precious says at our creative one, I noticed that also in struggling to get past 30.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please Ryan.
Pink Speedo BDR says it created one, I start tapping the wheel spin.
Grumps says at Precious underscore H is having his chickens peck.
Pink Speedo BDR says cries. For Grumps Q. Gaga Grumps says I think it's the delay in picking up the likes. He starts before I reset, but the delay means the leaderboard counts them. Gaga Grumps says cries you got. Bad plural boy.
Trina says chart.
Precious says Coral.
Gaga Grumps says Wheel got it on the nose.
Pink Speedo BDR says at Gaga and Grumps, I just had to.
Grumps says some things have been taken off the table.
Gaga Grumps says chart fits. Gaga Grumps says added a homeless A.
DVP says cramp.
Gaga Grumps says mainly the tea things.
DVP says oh no R.
Pink Speedo BDR says at Grumps.
Pink Speedo BD says cargo.
Gaga Grumps says cargo works. Pink Speedo BDR says coral.
Grumps says coral.
Precious says I said coral.
Gaga Grumps says I am sorry whoever suggested coral at guess 2. Gaga Grumps says sorry Precious.
Grumps says coral. Screams Rick Grimes.
Good game.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her
Gaga
lose!
Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let him push yours!
Pink Speedo BDR says at Precious _ fireworks.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Good game.
Gremlins, let's go!
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says DVD for Gaga. Share the live chat for chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Benjamin is in the house!
Gaga Grumps says a bliss in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says Owen Swansea. I missed yours. Thanks.
Trina says, has all the regs had a go at first word today?
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Milargaming says Heya.
Grumps says at Millar Gaming, good evening, sir.
Gaga Grumps says creative had two. And that's all I remember.
Milargaming says Huz. Milargaming says how's everyone?
Benjamin is in the house.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says Miller in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Tink Speedo BDR says I came over an hour into the live.
Miller Gaming says I couldn't do the in the house emoji for some reason.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Emily says front.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Emily in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Pink Speedo BD says up there.
Benjamin is in the house.
Grumps says at Millar Gaming.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the
Millar
chat
Gaming
now.
says now I can.
Grumps says that Millar Gaming needed a warm-up.
Pink Speedo BDR says QTPIA.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Oh.
Grumps says at PINKSPEEDOBDRO, you flirt.
Gaga Grumps says we have had some newbies winning today. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Trina says get a room.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
We would be honored if you
Chase
would
says
join
here
us.
for the last 10 minutes.
Candy says opera.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with O please Ryan.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Shy in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Pink Speedo BDR says orbit.
Gaga Grumps says how's the fox cub Shy?
Well, Creative One says no snipes today.
Gaga Grumps says orbit you got. Chase says fine, waiting to go into scouts. Gaga Grumps says we had one from Crystal earlier.
Grumps says it ill creative one Crystal sniped.
A creative one says okay, I missed it.
Gaga Grumps says a green bee moved in Tom 3 Wordle Street and the yellow eye needs a home. Gaga Grumps says along with the Wiggles. Gaga Grumps says needs an ILC.
Grumps says that LSI needs an eye.
Chase says are the typing sounds new or do I usually tune it out?
Gaga Grumps says B lives at number 3.
Grumps says what typing sounds?
Well, Creative One says Bible.
Gaga Grumps says they're new since yesterday.
Pink Speedo BDR says inbred, oops, too many letters.
Oh, Creative One says libel.
Pink Speeder BD says Bible.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps gaslighting. Gaga Grumps says Bible fits.
Che says heck not the sounds in my head again, I thought I gave those to Nan.
Trina says imbue.
Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 5. I still homeless.
Pink Speedo BDR says imbue.
A creative one says Ein.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
It's a performance and explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet, anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga.
Pink Speedo BDR says fireworks.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says let me set up our last game of the day.
Pink Speedo BDR says GGW GGW.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Rai in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Oh Creative One says wildcard round.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says did you tap yourself out Shiloh?
Everybody get down!
Oh Creative One says Ryan, I need your tap tricks.
Chase says I tapped myself into a scary place.
Gaga Grumps says Ryan won the crown. Shy stole it right off his head. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S please Shy.
Rare says it's TT that's doing that.
Jay says C's.
Gaga Grumps says C's you got.
Chase says the moment.
Gaga Grumps says going for the wipeout a wee.
Well, Creative One says fireworks.
Chase says always.
Gaga Grumps says wipeout denied.
Benjamin is in the house.
Oscar says flask.
Chase says Ugg Riot.
Gaga Grumps says Oscar in the house.
Rory says flush.
Gaga Grumps says flask fits.
Well, Creative One says robust.
Gaga Grumps says LA and S need homes.
Grumps says it ill creative 6 letters.
Rory says usual.
Gaga Grumps says robust is 6.
O Creative One says Atlas.
Gaga Grumps says usual works. Gaga Grumps says we end in owl and not fireworks.
Chase says it's not unusual.
Rere says nasal.
Oscar says end in cell, maybe.
Gaga Grumps says we end in sal. Gaga Grumps says nasal is a shout.
Trina says at Jay to be loved by anyone.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Chase says a Trina da 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 da
Good
da.
game. Good game. Good game. Good
Gaga
game.
Grumps says lol.
Good game. Good game. Trina says at Che. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps
Good
says
game.
thanks for joining me to play Wordle.
Good
I will be
game.
back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Grumps says do the Carlton dance.
A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga. Ra ra ra. Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by
Gaga
fate.
Grumps says do you do the daily
Play a
Wordle?
part
I post mine on my
inside
page
game.
and would love you to share your results.
A Wordle